The Palace of Meridian rose from Europa's ice like a frozen prayer, all translucent walls and impossible geometry. Thomas Grant pressed his palm against the transport window and wondered, not for the first time, what he'd done to deserve this assignment. Cultural observer, they'd called it. Document the coronation, they'd said. Nobody mentioned that the Asharan considered breathing too loudly a serious breach of etiquette, or that their palace was designed so everyone could watch everyone else through walls of crystalline ice. Privacy, apparently, was for species with something to hide. The landing platform materialized beneath the shuttle with mathematical precision. Thomas gathered his documentation equipment and stepped into air so cold it felt like inhaling knives. 3 Asharan officials waited in perfect triangular formation, their long ears swept back in what his briefing materials suggested was formal neutrality. Human observer Thomas Grant, the center official announced. Not a question. Questions implied uncertainty, which was apparently unseemly. You will follow designated protocols. Deviation results in immediate removal. Understood, Thomas said, resisting the urge to salute. His briefing had been very clear. Gestures mean things here, and most of those things are insults. They led him through corridors where ice walls revealed endless chambers of Asharan going about their precisely calibrated lives. Everything visible, everything observed, everyone performing their designated function with mechanical grace. Thomas felt like an ant farm had achieved sentience and developed a superiority complex. His assigned handler waited in the archive's anteroom. She was younger than the officials, with the same elegant ears but eyes that seemed older than they should be. Her robes marked her as lowest caste, the kind of detail Thomas had memorized from hours of cultural briefings he'd found more depressing than informative. I am Sera, she said, her voice carefully neutral. I will ensure you do not contaminate sacred spaces. I'll try not to breathe wrong, Thomas replied, then immediately regretted it when her eyes widened slightly. Alarm, he'd learned, though it looked like surprise. Humor is not appropriate during coronation preparation. Right, sorry. I have 17 different words for bow memorized, though. Would demonstrating those be appropriate or? Sera stared at him for 3 full seconds. You memorized the prostration variations. Well, I didn't want to accidentally perform the. I acknowledge your superiority in agricultural mathematics, bow, when I meant the. I respect your ancestral fishing rights, bow. That would be embarrassing. Something flickered across her face. Not quite a smile. Thomas suspected smiling ranked somewhere between breathing loudly and sedition, but something close. Those are not real distinctions. I know. Your language has 17 words that all translate to bow, and they all mean exactly the same thing. I was joking. Is joking allowed, or is that also contamination? I don't know, Sera said quietly. No one has tried. The following days blurred into an endless procession of ceremonies that made Thomas question the entire concept of efficiency. The Asharan could turn a simple document signing into a 4-hour spectacle involving precise hand positions, synchronized breathing, and what Thomas privately called competitive standing still. Sera shadowed him through it all, correcting his posture with whispered instructions, steering him away from sacred corridors, explaining the labyrinthine social mathematics that governed who could speak to whom under what celestial alignments. But during the rare moments when palace attention shifted elsewhere, when the High Council processed through distant chambers, or when meal protocols demanded everyone's focus, she became someone different. Tell me about Earth governance, she'd whisper while pretending to review archive classifications. Your briefing mentioned elected officials. People choose their leaders. Theoretically, Thomas said, scanning a crystal data tablet he couldn't actually read. It's messy, complicated, sometimes wonderful, sometimes disastrous, but yeah, we choose. And you can change your profession, your social position. Sure, my grandmother was born in poverty, became a university professor. My friend Jake was a lawyer, hated it, Now he makes furniture and says he's never been happier. Sera's hand stilled over the tablet. Your friend abandoned his designated function and this was permitted. Permitted, Sera, it was celebrated. He was miserable as a lawyer. Now he builds beautiful things with his hands and actually smiles. That's what we want for people: happiness, fulfillment, choice. Choice? Sera repeated the word like it was foreign language. We don't have that word in Asharan. Not really. We have selection between approved options and acceptance of designated path, but not choice. Thomas looked at her carefully. Through the ice walls, he could see other archivists moving through distant chambers, all wearing the same expression of careful neutrality. What would you choose if you could? I would. Sera stopped, her ears flattening slightly, fear Thomas had learned. This conversation is dangerous. Because you want something different. Because wanting is the illness. Contentment with designation is health. Ambition beyond station is psychological deterioration requiring correction. She recited it like a memorized text, but her voice shook. I was born to the archives. Genetic analysis at birth determined optimal function. I will serve here until death. This is efficiency. This is order. This is a prison, Thomas said quietly. Sera's eyes snapped to his, wide and startled. You don't understand. Our society functions because everyone accepts their place. The chaos you describe, people abandoning professions, choosing new paths, it would destroy us. Would it, or would it free you? Before Sera could answer, another archivist appeared in the doorway. Her expression was neutral, but Thomas caught the sharp look she directed at Sera. Assessment, suspicion, judgment, all compressed into a single glance. Archivist Sera, the coronation protocols require your attention. The human observer can navigate the public spaces without supervision for the next cycle. It wasn't a suggestion. Sera bowed at precisely the correct angle and departed without another word, but Thomas saw her hands trembling as she passed. That evening, Thomas discovered a data crystal on his sleeping platform. No note, no explanation, just a crystal containing forbidden texts, human philosophical works about liberty, revolution, social mobility. Works that Sera had clearly been studying in secret, risking everything to understand a world beyond these ice walls. He held the crystal and realized that Sera wasn't just curious about human culture. She was drowning in Asharan perfection, and these forbidden ideas were the only thing keeping her alive. The next morning, he noticed other archivists watching her. Not openly, nothing was ever open here, but through the transparent walls, reflected in ice surfaces, caught in peripheral vision. Sera's questions were becoming noticed, and in a society where deviation from designation was considered illness, being noticed was dangerous. You need to be more careful, Thomas whispered during a brief moment alone in the crystallography chamber. They're watching you. I know, Sera said. I've been watched my entire life. Every moment visible, every action observed, every thought that reaches my face analyzed for signs of malfunction. She looked at him and her eyes held something desperate. But Thomas, I can't stop wondering, what if we're wrong? What if perfect order is just another name for perfect death? Then maybe it's time someone said so. Someone will soon. Her voice dropped even lower. The coronation is in 2 days. Something is wrong with the succession. I've been reviewing medical archives, 3 potential heirs over 2 centuries, all struck with mysterious genetic deterioration at crucial moments. The pattern is too consistent. You think someone is eliminating heirs. I think our perfect order hides perfect corruption, and I think the coronation will reveal it. Sera's ears flattened completely, terror, determination, and something Thomas couldn't identify. I'm going to speak. When the moment comes, I'm going to present the evidence. They'll execute me for it, speaking above my station, accusing superiors. But someone has to. Thomas grabbed her arm without thinking, then released it immediately as she flinched. Touch. He'd just broken their most fundamental law. But Sera didn't pull away. She stared at where his hand had been, her eyes cycling through emotions Thomas couldn't name. Don't do this alone, he said. Whatever happens, you're not alone. Through the ice walls, the watchers continued watching, and the coronation drew closer. The grand chamber of ascension made every other room in the palace look modest. Its domed ceiling revealed Europa's ice surface and Jupiter's massive presence beyond, while thousands of Asharan filled the tiered observation platforms in perfect hierarchical arrangement. The highest castes near the coronation platform, the lowest, including the archivists, relegated to distant corners where they could record but barely see. Thomas stood in the alien observers section, surrounded by dignitaries from a dozen worlds, all maintaining the careful stillness that Asharan ceremony demanded. His documentation equipment hummed quietly, recording everything for Earth's anthropological archives. Somewhere in the archivist's corner, Sera would be doing the same, her presence so far from the center that she was barely visible. The ceremony began with mathematical precision. Prince Kale, the designated heir, processed through the chamber accompanied by the Council of Purity. His robes refracted light in patterns that supposedly demonstrated genetic worthiness, and his every movement had been rehearsed for months. The High Chancellor began the coronation invocation, his voice carrying through the chamber's perfect acoustics. Thomas had studied enough Asharan ritual to know this would take hours. He settled in for ceremonial endurance, his mind wandering to Sera's warnings about corruption, about patterns in the medical archives, about heirs who mysteriously failed at crucial moments. Prince Kale reached the ascension platform, raised his arms in the ritual gesture, and collapsed. The chamber erupted in controlled chaos, which for Asharan meant frozen stillness with undercurrents of panic. Palace physicians materialized with scanning equipment, their instruments painting holographic diagnostics above the fallen prince. Thomas couldn't read the Asharan medical displays, but he understood the collective gasp that rippled through the assembly. "Genetic deterioration," someone whispered, the words spreading like ice cracking. "The heir is disqualified." The High Chancellor's voice cut through the chaos. "The coronation cannot proceed without a qualified heir of the primary bloodline. The council will convene emergency deliberation." Thousands of Asharan stood frozen, uncertain. Protocol had no provision for this. The ceremony should have been perfect, everything was always perfect, and perfection didn't include heirs collapsing from genetic disease. Thomas scanned the crowd, searching for Sera. He found her moving through the masses with unusual purpose, her archivist robes allowing her to slip through crowds that would have blocked higher castes. She reached the medical displays, studied them with intensity that suggested she understood what she was seeing. Her face transformed, shock, anger, then something Thomas recognized from their conversations, the desperate courage of someone who decided that silence was worse than death. Sera stepped onto the ceremonial platform, a lower-caste archivist, standing where only royalty and high council belonged. The violation was so profound that several Asharan actually gasped, the first uncontrolled sound Thomas had heard them make. "This is not genetic deterioration," Sera's voice rang through the chamber, amplified by acoustics designed to carry royal proclamations. "This is poison." The silence that followed could have shattered diamond. For 3 heartbeats, nobody moved. Then the grand chamber exploded into chaos that no amount of protocol could contain. "Archivist, you will be silent." The High Chancellor's voice cracked like breaking ice. "You violate sacred space, you speak above your station." "I present evidence," Sera interrupted, and Thomas's heart stopped because interrupting the High Chancellor was essentially suicide. 3 heirs over 2 centuries. Prince Kale is the 4th, all struck by identical symptoms at crucial succession moments. She manipulated the medical display with practiced efficiency. The pattern is statistically impossible unless someone is systematically eliminating heirs. The Council of Purity surged forward, outrage incarnate, but others were studying Sera's data, minds processing what she'd presented. Thomas saw understanding ripple through the crowd. Their perfect order had been hiding perfect corruption. This is madness, Counselor Vrath declared. A low-caste archivist, driven mad by ambition, fabricating conspiracy. Then explain the toxicology, Sera shot back. This compound mimics genetic markers but degrades within hours. It appears in tissue samples from all four heirs. Vrath's expression shifted. His hand moved to his robe, triggering something. Energy barriers slammed into place around the grand chamber, sealing exits. Emergency lockdown, weaponized against internal threats. The archivist has succumbed to psychological deterioration, Vrath said smoothly. Palace guards in his livery materialized, weapons drawn. She must be removed, permanently. The guards advanced on Sera. She stood alone on the coronation platform, facing armed soldiers with nothing but truth. Thomas didn't think. He vaulted the observer's barrier, sprinted across sacred floor, and reached the platform just as the guards did. He spread his arms wide, placing himself between Sera and the weapons. "Stand aside, human," the lead guard said. "Deal with the evidence, not the messenger," Thomas countered. Sera stepped around him. She stood before the entire court and spoke with the voice of someone who'd lived in silence too long. "I have served the archives my entire life. I was born to this function. I accepted this because acceptance is what we're taught." Her voice strengthened. "But I met someone who showed me that accepting injustice isn't health, it's death. This human treated me like my thoughts mattered. Like I was a person, not a function." She turned to Thomas, her eyes holding terror and determination and something that looked like freedom. In front of the entire Asharan court, Sera reached out and embraced him. Her arms wrapped around his shoulders, uncertain and unpracticed. Her head pressed against his chest. Her long ears flattened in absolute vulnerability, complete trust. The grand chamber went silent. Shocked silence of a world watching its foundations crack. Thomas's arms closed around her, holding her steady, feeling her tremble with the revolutionary weight of this simple act. "Sera of the Archives," the High Chancellor began. "I have chosen connection over isolation," Sera said, her voice muffled but carrying. "Truth over comfortable lies, and I am not alone." Movement in the crowd. An engineer embraced his child openly. An artist reached for another artist, their hands clasping. A maintenance worker embraced their partner, tears streaming. Small acts of rebellion rippled through the chamber like fractures through ice. Not everyone, but enough. Prince Kale's voice rose from the medical platform. "A society that punishes truth has lost its way. Counselor Vrath will be detained. The laws of caste contact will be reviewed, and this archivist will be appointed voice of the archives." The High Chancellor studied Sera. "You have shattered order." "I have revealed what order was hiding," Sera replied. "Then perhaps it is time we learn to build something better than perfect." 3 weeks later, Thomas and Sera stood on an observation deck watching Jupiter's storms. "The Council approved reforms," Sera said. "Caste contact laws relaxed. Career mobility studied. It's not revolution, but it's movement." "You started something," Thomas said. "I'm terrified. I don't know how to be anything but what I was taught." "Then you'll figure it out together, make mistakes, learn." Sera smiled. "You're staying. Someone has to help navigate this." Thomas grinned. "Besides, I'm not leaving you alone." "What are we?" Sera asked quietly. "Friends, partners, two people who decided connection mattered more than protocol." "All of those," Sera said, her hand finding his.